with the person on the next desk. And now I got it all packaged on my hip, and I still don't know what to do with it, because as my predecessor here said, we're still scratching the surface on this. I don't know where this is going to go. But to the general question of how this has changed my job, social media has made my job a whole lot easier and a whole lot more difficult. And that schizophrenia is probably going to carry on through my comments here about stuff. But what I think is most striking for me every time I stop and think and look back, there is nothing new with what's going on now. All the stuff that you see on Twitter, on YouTube, all the little bits about cat picture, kid pictures, all that stuff, it's the same stuff we used to stuff around the ads in the old Thompson newspaper I worked at, the Reporter down in Cambridge. I remember a guy one time, back in the late 80s when I first started working there, a guy walked in with a potato that looked like Richard Nixon's head. And we took a picture of it. Get that better? Okay, sorry. A guy who, this is a good story, I gotta make sure I tell this one over again. A guy walked in, he was about 60 years old I think, and he was grew potatoes. And he had a potato that looked like Richard Nixon's head. His nose and everything, and we went, okay, take a picture, put it in the paper with about maybe 100 words with it. And that was not unusual to do that. Now you find that stuff on YouTube or a quick note on Twitter or something. So it's nothing different. That's what I find most striking when people think, oh, look at how it's all changed. People still talk about that stuff. It's now just a different way of doing it. I had a couple of examples I made little notes of, because there's some cool things that have happened when I've been playing with it. As a general comment, you talk about different social media channels. I don't really like Facebook much. I've never really gotten into that. I've been playing with Facebook for 3 or 4 years. I find it's like a high school reunion every day, and it doesn't do a lot for me for what I'm looking for local news, except when I'm working on a deadline trying to find a picture of a teenager who died in a car crash, or friends of that person, which is something we always did before. Now we have a different way of trying to essentially do what we call a pickup on an obituary. That part of the job hasn't changed. Now we just have more places to dig around and try and find the information. Twitter, when I first saw it, I hated it. I didn't think I'd ever care when somebody's cat hacked up a hairball and you put it on Twitter. But I found it is probably, to use the social media vernacular, which I hate, it's awesome. And that's the only time I want to hear that today, because I hate that word in social media. It's everywhere. But the word I like to use for Twitter is serendipity, because I never know what I'm going to get when I go trolling around in there. And it sometimes happens in really constructive ways. And this is when I thought back about how Twitter works for me, this is one that really came through. About a year or so ago, I was in the office, and it was a Wednesday, and we heard fire dispatch on the scanner about chemical fire of some kind along the 401 out near Ayr. And people were reporting green smoke. Okay, that's not a good thing. And just as I was heading out of the office, we were driving out there 35 minutes, people were sending us photos taken by their iPhones. We were pulling off on the side of the 401, taking pictures of this great big green plume of smoke, and we're going, yeah, go out there. So they were posting that on the web while I was driving out there. I get out there, and sure enough, yeah, the fire was spread out, but yeah, that smoke was green. And I started chatting with people, and I tweeted that I was out there at this chemical fire, blah, blah, blah. And within about 2 minutes, I had an email back to my BlackBerry from a spokesperson at the Ministry of Environment saying, I'm checking into this for you, Kevin, and I'll get you some information of what we're doing about it, whether there was a problem. She happened to follow me because I've dealt with her in the past, and I went, okay. And within 10 minutes, while I'm still out there trying to talk to the fire chief and the building owner, she had sent me back all the stuff I was going to ask anyways. I thought, I got really well trained, this is pretty good. But I managed to have a complete story standing on this, essentially on a road beside the 401, ready and written in about 35, 40 minutes. And I filed it from the front seat of my minivan, sent it back to the office, they had it posted up, and I went, oh, that was interesting. Because all the stuff I did wasn't anything different than I did before. I just could do it more efficiently and faster, and all of a sudden it was done, and I didn't have to worry about having something linger and linger, which is, for a reporter, that's good when there's always something more coming down the pipe you have to work on, because it's an expectation. You have to produce stuff every day. It's unusual where you get a chance to sit back and relax and sort of think about things and ponder big picture things. I'm going to find another one here. We're almost done. I know, it's giving me a poke here. The basic thing is it's still reporting, is still just asking people questions, talking to people and everything else. That hasn't changed with it. It's now the interaction with people, and when I say it's more difficult, it's now because there's a bigger pot, a bigger place we have to mine for the information. It's like a bigger coffee shop you walk into and try and find something interesting to follow on, and that takes time. And the more social media you have and the more stuff around you, the less time I seem to have to do it. And that's the frustration I've got to sort out. But that's my problem. That's not social media's problem. And I'll shut up now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, it's loud enough. Good. I'm just going to jump right into it because we don't have a lot of time, and I'm going to take things a little bit differently just because at the Weather Network on television, things are a little bit more different in terms of the interaction, and you want people to really identify with you as a person when you're a presenter on air. And so where you don't find Facebook very useful, I actually find Facebook very useful to interact with people because you have to remember that it's just your average person watching TV. And I think your average person is more comfortable being on Facebook than on Twitter, and they want to be able to identify with you, and they want to be able to interact with you. And so I wouldn't rule out Facebook if you're starting journalism, if you're already in it, just because it's an easy way for people to ask you questions. And the interaction, I would say, is 50% of Twitter as well. And interaction is basically goodwill. And I remember taking a journalism course, and one of the most important things I learned was that goodwill can't be bought. Goodwill is so valuable. So if you can just speak with people and let them ask you questions and you ask them questions back. I'll put it this way. If you've ever Googled Weather Girls or even Googled my name, you'll get some pretty nasty things coming up. Sorry. Oh, that's so much better. Okay. Again, if you were to Google Weather Girls, you get some pretty, nasty things coming up because there are certain whatever fetishes out there. And what I've noticed in my 5 years at the Weather Network is that over the last couple of years, that's so annoying, I'm so sorry. Over the last couple of years, with social media, interacting with people, they're less like that. You know, the guys that I've seen on, I'm going to say, like, chat rooms or whatever, not that we look at them all the time, but on message boards, we've seen nasty things. Those same people are now talking to us on Facebook and Twitter, and because we're interacting with them, it's almost like they think we're friends now, and so they tune it back a little bit. And so I found that extremely valuable as a woman on the air. We're on the air, 4, 5, 6 hours a day, so people not only are coming to us for information, but they're coming to us on social media just because they want to make that interaction. So that's really important. But as far as Twitter itself is concerned, 50% of it is the interaction with people. The other 50% is strictly information-based. And one example I can give you is when the Godrich tornado happened, we did a 1-month follow-up story. And Jackie, actually, I remember following her, and she was always talking about Godrich, Godrich, Godrich. And I thought, well, I need a source. I need someone who's lost a lot for my story. And I messaged Jackie, and she hooked me up with someone. So that's really useful as a journalist to be able to connect with people and to just ask out there, do you have any sources for me? And that's been very useful. But specifically for the Weather Network, we usually have our highest ratings during active stormy weather. And when you get active stormy weather, a lot of times the power goes out. So you want people to be watching you and getting all of this vital life and death information with tornado warnings, but they can't even see you on TV. But they can have their BlackBerry or their iPhone, and they can get information that way. So if people are following us on Facebook and Twitter, our social media expert, our social media writers, they can put out the information instantly. You know, we have a tornado warning in these areas. And on the, I don't know if you watched on the night of August 24th, sorry, on the night of August 24th, there were the big storms right across southern Ontario with the tornado warnings and whatnot, and I was in London. But I remember coming back to the studio, and the IS writer, we call it the Interactive Service Writer, who manages Facebook and Twitter, she was getting so many thank yous from people all over southern Ontario saying, thank you, I wouldn't have known if there was a tornado warning or a severe thunderstorm warning if you weren't tweeting all of that information or answering our Facebook questions. So I think a lot of people get scared during those situations. They don't have electricity, they don't have power, they can't see us on television, but they can get their information that way. So it's been very useful in that sense, and it can be life or death. people get that tornado warning right to their Twitter feed from the Weather Network, and that's been extremely useful. So again, Twitter, I would say 50% of it is information-based. You can put out information and you can get information back. We're a 24-hour network, and at 3 in the morning when I'm about to go on air, there are no other really news sources giving us information. But if there's an earthquake in Japan, I know that because of Twitter. I can see people who I follow in Japan or in Asia or somewhere where there's a different time zone. And you can get information that way. So it's a good way to, again, get information, give information, but also don't forget how important interaction is with people, because there are so many different newspapers, there are so many different media outlets. If they can identify with you as a journalist, then that's a reason to keep coming back to you.
Thank you. 15 seconds to spare. Toronto, Nadia.
All right, check. No. Hello, you won't have any problems hearing me this morning. When I first started at CTV about 5 years ago, really social media was something that we kind of grumbled at. It was like, another thing we have to kind of maintain, another thing that we have to kind of keep an eye on. And there was a bit of reluctancy, I think. And there is a bit of reluctancy from some news organizations, perhaps, to kind of get on board that social media train. But I think it got to a point where you couldn't really ignore it anymore. You had to really kind of embrace it and kind of incorporate it. Now what you'll see a lot in our newscasts is, you know, bumpers saying, follow us on Twitter, follow us on this or that. I made some notes here. And really, about 5 years ago, we didn't have a social media presence at all at CTV. And we, I think, in my opinion, if I can say this, I think we're still a little bit lacking in it. There is really no mandate in terms of, you know, all reporters have to tweet, or, you know, we must have a Twitter presence. I think it's something that we're trying, but perhaps we don't have as much dedication as we should. Reporters at CTV are on Twitter if they want to. We have to specify whether it's a personal account or whether it's a work account, like many organizations. But I think that social media has changed aspects of our job. Not necessarily hasn't changed the entire thing, but perhaps has changed aspects in how we gather and how we filter and how we distribute news. So with gathering news, a lot of my colleagues here have mentioned the fact that we have this tool now that we can go and we can troll for new information, we can mine for information, and there's an example, everybody's been giving examples. We got a tip, I can't remember exactly the date, but when there was the Woodstock explosion where that apartment building, there was an apartment building, we had first reports, 300 people, explosion, orange helicopters on their way, about 6 helicopters, that's all we knew. We had a tip from someone who used to work at our station, and we didn't know where it was in Woodstock. So the writer immediately jumped onto Twitter and started, entering certain search functions, and lo and behold, we found a picture with a geotag of the location of where this building was. So there go off the 2 reporters, we go to this area, and of course you can't really miss this huge, massive plume of black smoke. So we found our source and our story that way, through Twitter. So that's one way, we solicit interviews, we gather interviews that way. Filtering. The person who now tunes into the newscast doesn't have to wait for us to tell you what you want to hear. They now can filter and they can find out the exact information that they want, right? They want to skip over news, they want to go straight to Darren Stevenson and find out what some sports are, then they can do that. They don't have to wait until they can just go for the live Twitter updates of a sports game or something. They can just filter right to exactly what they want and distribute. I think perhaps is where social media has changed, or has the aspects of social media has changed for us the most in distributing, how it's distributing. It's the biggest impact. I think we it gives the person, or the audience, who are watching us, gives them, an opportunity to see the behind the scenes that they've never seen. And it allows us to create a bridge. I think that bridge was kind of lacking before between us and our audience. We showed up at 6 o'clock, we told you what you wanted or what we thought you wanted to hear. and that was it. There is now a discourse, I think, that didn't really happen before. I can make connections with people. I can make connections with people who are watching, who specifically like my work or specifically like our newscast. And I think when it comes to media relations, I think how it's changed there is, again, there's that bridge that perhaps it allows you, there's a bridge there that was there, but it's another avenue. One thing that I am noticing, though, is a lot of media relations people are cold emailing me instead of the cold call. They're just sending me a random press release, sending it to my inbox because my information is out on social media, and that really doesn't appeal to me. What really social media can do is establish relationships in every aspect, and there are a number of people that I communicate on a regular basis on social media, and have reached out to me and giving me sources and contacts, and I think that's how it's helped media, is that they have a, they have a, they have a direct line to us, so I think that's how it's changed for media professionals.
Hi, so I'll start off by apologizing for dashing in here at the last minute. But I think I'm coming into this panel with a slightly different perspective because I've never actually worked in journalism without social media being part of the reality. When I started my Master of Journalism in 2009, that's actually pretty much exactly when Twitter was really starting to take hold of Canadian political reporting and like throughout the Canadian media state. I didn't actually jump on right away. It took me until the following May to actually sign up for Twitter. A lot of my classmates were really into it. It wasn't necessarily for me. I didn't want another social media to monitor. I thought it would just be eat up more time like Facebook does. But once I was on it, I found that Twitter really is a different animal than Facebook in that you can select what you're following. And I think that old adage of, Twitter's about what people had for breakfast or their cat coughing out the hairball, I think it's actually started to shift a bit where Twitter is more focused on information and discussion and issues than Facebook, but it could also depend on who you follow. I don't choose to follow somebody like Ashton Kutcher who's going to tweet those kinds of things. I tend to follow people who post relevant things to the greater Waterloo Region community, the things that I cover, and also just areas of interest for myself. So I think the most important thing to remember about social media, especially for younger journalists, is that it's just one tool, and I don't think it's our most important tool, especially after having worked for an extended period of time that's not just like a brief school internship. I think the telephone will always be our #1 primary tool because you're never going to get the same kind of connection with someone just having a back and forth over email or Twitter. I think if you're setting up a meeting or something, the phone will always be a better place to get that. That being said, Twitter does have two important functions that I think we've already touched on a lot, which is it helps with the gathering and the dissemination of news, and then it has this new sort of aspect for journalism because, journalists used to just be a byline and you sort of had no idea who they were, especially in print, and it gives us an opportunity to interact with the community. I find it very useful as somebody who, I don't have kids, I rent my apartment, there's a lot of issues that I cover that I don't have people in my greater social circle who it affects. So if I need to talk to somebody who has kids about a new policy change in the school board, Twitter's a great place to go to try and find somebody like that. It also really helped me when I moved back to Waterloo after finishing my master's to get a sense of what some of the important issues were in the area and the things people were talking about. So I think it's very valuable as a tool, but I think it's also easy to end up spending almost too much time on it when it is just something that enhances the basic functions of our job.
Thank you, Ashley. So I've been monitoring our Twitter feed and I haven't heard any questions here. Do you guys have any questions that you